The Nintendo Switch 2 is pretty much the worst kept secret now at this point in the industry, and while there is a lot of fake information, lies, and rumors going around about the system, today I wanted to take a look at the top 25 most likely JRPGs to come to the system in a relatively short time period after its release. Now, these are games that have been rumored beforehand. These are games that have already been announced but don't have a Switch version, or games that are already out and could get updates to run and look much better on the newer system based off of what Nintendo is doing. But before we jump into any of that, what's good everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get my Nintendo Switch and RPG videos first. Now let's go ahead and jump right into number 25 here, and that is a brand new Dragon Quest Monsters game. Now, Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince on the Nintendo Switch has sold over 1 million units official from Square Enix. That is incredible for a very low budget game that essentially has sold most of its units in Japan. This might be the push that the series needs to kind of get a little bit more of a budget behind it, as it's selling incredibly well and continues to do well. So I would expect there to be a new Dragon Quest Monsters game to come to the Nintendo Switch 2, in addition to probably getting an update. They're probably going to divert some funds and some resources to getting a Switch 2 version of Dragon Quest Monsters, an enhanced version of the game. We've seen that before with previous Dragon Quest games. Dragon Quest 11 got one, in addition to other Dragon Quest Monsters games as well, getting enhanced or re-releases. So I think that a new Dragon Quest Monsters game and an enhanced version of Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince is very likely for the Nintendo Switch 2. Next up here is Pokemon Legends. I do feel that Nintendo will announce a brand new Pokemon Legends game along with Game Freak and the Pokemon Company for the next generation Nintendo Switch. Now, this is interesting because Pokemon Legends came out back in 2022. So are they right around the time for a Legends sequel? Are they right around the time for something on the Nintendo Switch? Is still kind of here. It seems like a little bit of a tweener game. This could be one of the titles that maybe started out on Nintendo Switch and was moved over to Nintendo Switch 2, or maybe they even do a dual release of the game. But I'm guessing that if this game does happen, it's probably going to be on just the next Nintendo Switch system, as Game Freak and the Pokemon Company and Nintendo have to figure out a solid plan for Pokemon going forward, especially after the problems that happened with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Now, that could be hardware related and of course Game Freak experience related, but maybe with new hardware it can mitigate some of those issues and a renewed focus in terms of making sure that things don't launch the way that they did for Scarlet and Violet. Next up here, we've got Mario RPG game, a brand new one. I think Nintendo has definitely seen the light here with Super Mario RPG. That game is outselling and doing better review-wise than most of the Paper Mario games that aren't RPGs. And we also have Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door coming out this year, and that is going to do better than Super Mario RPG Remake did. But those sales cannot lie, and I think that it really is going to determine the future of how Nintendo goes about a Mario RPG series. I think that the Paper Mario: The Origami King experiment was interesting, and some of the other games that they've had, Color Splash and different titles, but I think that these sales are finally solidifying from what we've seen with Super Mario RPG being one of the better selling games in Japan for the full year, even though it released at the end of the year. I think it shows that the direction of what Mario RPG games need to go, or Paper Mario series. Now, when Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door comes out this year, that will be the nail in the coffin of the previously released adventure Paper Mario styles of games back to the RPG Paper Mario and Mario RPG series that people really do enjoy. So I think whether it's a new Mario and Luigi game, or it's a new Paper Mario RPG game, or a new Mario RPG game in the same vein as Super Mario RPG, that's going to be the direction going forward on the Nintendo Switch 2. Next up, we've got Monolith Soft's new IP. Now, I'm very excited about this because Monolith Soft has already revealed that they are working on their next game. I have received information myself that Monolith Soft's next game will be on the next generation Nintendo Switch, and it will be used as a centerpiece for the system. Monolith Soft has always been known for really showing what they can do from a technological standpoint on Nintendo systems. For example, dating all the way back to the GameCube with Baten Kaitos. You also had games like Xenoblade 1 on the Wii, Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3 on the Nintendo Switch, showing off what the system can do despite those not being the most powerful systems on the market. So I fully expect Monolith Soft's new IP to be a showcase for Nintendo, showing off what they're going to do. Whether that's a Xenoblade Chronicles X remake or remaster or re-release, whether that's a brand new game, a new Xeno game, who knows the shape and form it's going to take. But I do think that it's going to be something that's very impressive overall when it comes to gameplay systems and graphics. Next up is a game that's coming out very soon as the time that I'm recording this video, and that is Granblue Fantasy Relink. Now, this is a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC game, but based on the release window of this game, I'm not exactly sure how well it might do. Now, they haven't done anything outside of PC and PlayStation when it comes to Cygames, but Cygames have a good relationship with Nintendo over Dragalia Lost, and I think that they're probably planning something, and they also have other business dealings too, as well as mobile stuff, but I think that they're probably planning something like this, Granblue Fantasy Relink, on the next Nintendo system for an easier port. So I would say that Granblue Fantasy Relink will make its way over to the Nintendo Switch 2 at some point. Now, next up is Final Fantasy XIV. This is interesting because Final Fantasy XIV is a game that recently just went into beta for the Xbox system. So this is the first time that we've seen the game outside of PC and PlayStation, despite Final Fantasy XIV being, what, a decade old at this point? It's getting pretty old. So I feel that, yes, they have Xbox done at this point, and they've stated that they do want to make on Nintendo Switch as well. They want to have a huge player base. Final Fantasy XIV is the most successful Final Fantasy game of all time in terms of revenue. I think that if you get the Nintendo Switch 2, which is going to start hot, which is going to be the best seller in Japan, you get some hype with that, with Final Fantasy XIV. I think it could explode the memberships for Square Enix and make Nintendo and Square Enix a ton of money. So I would expect, based off of previous things that they said, based off the game coming to Xbox, that there will be a Nintendo Switch 2 version of Final Fantasy XIV. All right, next up, we're going to move on to Metaphor ReFantazio. This is a game that a noted Persona leaker has stated is coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, alongside another game that we'll talk about here. But Metaphor ReFantazio is the game that I'm really excited for. In my 2024 Nintendo Switch JRPGs most anticipated list, it was number 1 on the list. So I'm very excited for this. This is a brand new game from the Persona team, the people that you know and love overall. So yeah, it looks great. It's a hybrid between action RPG and turn-based RPG, and it's exactly what I wanted to play from Atlas at this point, and it's coming out later this year on all systems but the Nintendo Switch, but I think it's coming to Nintendo Switch 2. All right, next up is Yakuza Like a Dragon. Now, Infinite Wealth, the reviews have been coming out. The game is pretty much out depending on when you're watching this, and it's been incredible. This series has been phenomenal for Sega. Really, like, people love Kiryu. People love what this does, and there is not any Yakuza games on Nintendo hardware outside of the Yakuza 1 and 2 on the Wii U, and that was never released outside of Japan. Now, Sega has been very hesitant when it comes to the Yakuza games, Like a Dragon games, to be released on Nintendo hardware because they feel that it's not a good fit for the fans. But I do feel that some of it is a bit beyond that when it comes to the Dragon engine, when it comes to what they're trying to do. I think that Nintendo can provide something with the Nintendo Switch 2 and a system that I feel might have a bit more appeal to them to develop this game on. So, Yakuza Like a Dragon, maybe it doesn't get Infinite Wealth, which is the newest one, but I do think that the one previous to that, the turn-based RPG, would fit well with the Nintendo Switch 2 and the people that buy the system and the people that like games on there. A lot of turn-based RPGs, even mature-rated ones, sell over 1 million units. For example, a game like Shin Megami Tensei 5 did incredibly well on the Nintendo Switch, and that's a mature rated game. Same goes for Persona 5. That did incredibly well too. So if those games can have success on the Nintendo Switch, Yakuza Like a Dragon definitely can as well. So I do see that coming over in some way, shape, or form. Next up is NieR Replicant version 1.22 and all the rest of those numbers. Yes, I think that NieR had a very successful bout on the Nintendo Switch with NieR Automata, the End of Yora edition. I think that they just ran out of time a little bit when it comes to NieR Replicant. I definitely think that they want that game on the Nintendo Switch. NieR Automata did great when it comes to the price point, the port, and everything, but it's a little bit too late to just start stacking on the rest of it. Nintendo Switch 2 is coming. I think NieR Replicant would be a great way to start off the NieR franchise on the Nintendo Switch 2, and maybe even a patch when it comes to NieR Automata, the end of your edition, to run and look better on the Nintendo Switch 2 as well, considering how well that game did. So I do see NieR continuing on Nintendo's successor to the Nintendo Switch. Now let's get into the next game here, guys, and we've got Bravely Default, the remake. Now, Team Asano, they are going to have a field day when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. They were there to support the Nintendo Switch right at launch with Project Octopath Traveler. It was revealed at that big event in January 2017 and went on to sell 3 million units total plus. And most of that was on the Nintendo Switch. So it's very good to see that they've teased and they pretty much hinted that Bravely Default is coming. Now, that could be a Switch game, but I do think that it's possible that it's a Nintendo Switch 2 game, or it's the big game that they reveal at a Nintendo event would be Bravely Default Remake. And that game absolutely needs a remake. It's only on the Nintendo 3DS. You can't play it anywhere else. There's Bravely Default 2 on the Nintendo Switch, so it would be great if you can be able to play via backwards compatibility Bravely Default 2, and then also have the original Bravely Default Remake and fix up some of the issues with that game. If they fix up some of the late game stuff that happened and what you have to do, I think Bravely Default is literally one of the greatest RPGs that I've ever played. So absolutely, I see them doing a Bravely Default remake on the Nintendo Switch 2 and it looking more gorgeous than ever. All right, next up here is a game that people are very excited about, and that's Dragon's Dogma 2. I do think Dragon's Dogma 2 will be on the Nintendo Switch 2 or the next gen Nintendo Switch. And the reason why I say that is because, once again, Capcom absolutely has been helping out Nintendo quite a bit when it comes to different things. We have Monster Hunter, we have various other games, Ace Attorney and stuff. They want to put games on the Nintendo Switch, or they did put that. They helped out with the Switch and were probably involved somewhat when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. So I absolutely see them putting Dragon's Dogma 2 on the Nintendo Switch 2 at some point, especially because Dragon's Dogma is on the Nintendo Switch. It's a port that nobody felt would really come over, considering how they don't really develop many Dragon's Dogma games, but they ported that over to Nintendo Switch and it did really well for them. So I can see them porting over Dragon's Dogma 2 as well to the next system, and it should be pretty good to be able to play that anywhere that you want. Now, next up is a brand new Fire Emblem game. We have to talk about this because Fire Emblem is a staple when it comes to Nintendo handhelds and when it comes to Nintendo consoles for the most part, outside of the Wii U and N64, I guess. And I think that Nintendo is hard at work with Intelligent Systems and maybe even Koei Tecmo to get us a brand new Fire Emblem game, and I'm very excited to the possibilities of this. Now, there are rumors going around that Fire Emblem 4 Remake, that is Genealogy of the Holy War, will be on the Nintendo Switch. I've heard this information myself, so I theorize that maybe that could be a Switch 2 game and not, but it seems like it might be May based off of some interesting rumors on the internet, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. But overall, you can bet that there will be a brand new Fire Emblem game on the Nintendo Switch 2, and it could be a game that we see more sooner than later, as Fire Emblem Three Houses was announced in 2017, February, before the Nintendo Switch was even released. There was a Fire Emblem game announced, and I think they did that because they didn't want people to be worried about the Switch not getting Fire Emblem, because they had a new game for the 3DS with Echoes and they had a mobile game. So I think that's part of it, but you know they're always working on the next major Fire Emblem game, especially considering how well Fire Emblem Three Houses sold. Yeah, it's pretty much a lock at this point. Now, next up is a game that Square Enix might be trying to move away from, but I think has a chance at getting ported over, and that is Star Ocean: The Divine Force. There was no Nintendo Switch version of this game, and I think that maybe it suffered a little bit because of that. Star Ocean: The First Departure R did really well. Star Ocean: The Second Story R is doing really well on the Nintendo Switch. There are fans of Star Ocean on Nintendo platforms. Now, The Divine Force is not the best Star Ocean game, but it's the best Star Ocean game in the modern or HD era when it comes down to it. So maybe if they want to salvage a little bit of what's left from this game in terms of the development resources and money, they can put that into the Nintendo Switch 2 and maybe get some sales here and there for it. Maybe fix up some of the things, have like a Star Ocean: The Divine Force S or something like that, like they did with Dragon Quest, but we'll see. I know Square Enix is trying to move away from having so many JRPGs and relying upon that, but I do think that Star Ocean has renewed interest, especially after the Second Story R and how well that did on the Nintendo Switch. Now, next up is Genshin Impact, a game that was supposed to be on the standard Nintendo Switch, and they literally ghosted us. They unplugged the cord and ran away. They literally just said, no, we're good. We're not going to give you guys any updates. So I'm guessing that the game has been moved over to the Nintendo Switch 2 for an easier port and for better monetization, because maybe they just don't like how the system works with the Nintendo Switch. But I still feel that Genshin Impact has a very good chance. Now, you can also throw in some of the other games from them. You have Honkai Star Rail. These are games that obviously if you have it on more platforms, you're going to do better. Now, they're not on Xbox yet from what I understand, but I think that with the Nintendo Switch, you have a huge base of people in Asia, right? That's going to love this type of game. Mobile gaming is huge in Asia, and I think that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be an instant hit for them to make a lot of money off of that platform. And if the systems and the mechanics when it comes to the online are a bit better for that, then I think that Genshin Impact then makes the jump over to the Nintendo Switch 2. So we will see about that. Now, next up is something that a lot of you guys are probably going to say, no way, but I think it's happening. That's a brand new Golden Sun game. Yes, the 4th game in the series is coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, there was rumors about it coming to the Nintendo Switch, but those ended up being not necessarily reliable considering the source. I made multiple videos on that, and I'm sorry about that because this person that I was referencing is not reliable. They did get some minor thing right with one thing that they said with Golden Sun in there, but ultimately most of the stuff that they said was not correct. However, Nintendo did reveal, and it's already out for everyone to play, Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age from the GBA on the Nintendo Switch Online, and it got a lot of impressions. A lot of Golden Sun fans have went out there and showed their support, have liked the tweets, have retweeted, and it started downloading and even purchased Nintendo Switch Online plus the expansion pack in order to get in on the Golden Sun action because they were so happy that the series got acknowledged. I think it's finally time. The Nintendo Switch 2, you can build a solid Golden Sun game that is right and that would really fit the, I would say, aura of Golden Sun being a portable style game, but also having console level style graphics. I think a double A game in the same vein of Bravely Default, not the art style, but in the same type of budget like Bravely Default makes sense. I think that that could absolutely work in today's day, and maybe we see that on the Nintendo Switch 2. Although I think Golden Sun would have been a phenomenal candidate to come back on the Nintendo Switch and be just as good, but hey, maybe we get Golden Sun 2 and we finally have the continuation of what's going on in the Golden Sun universe. All right, guys, we've got a lot more here. Let's talk about that. We talked about Bravely Default. We've talked about Octopath Traveler. Now let's talk about the sequel to one of the best JRPGs ever made with Octopath Traveler 3. Yeah, I think it's absolutely happening. Team Asano has been teasing and has been hinting that they've got a lot in store for 2024 and beyond. The Nintendo Switch 2 is a prime opportunity to really take advantage like they did with the original Nintendo Switch, and I think it's going to happen here. Octopath Traveler 3, now that we know confirmed that Octopath Traveler 2, despite not selling as well as the original game, still sold over 1 million units and continues to do well on the download. Square Enix hasn't announced any new numbers past the 1 million, but from what I understand, the game at the $30 to $40 price point is doing a lot better. I did talk about the Amazon sales and everything there as well, so I think that Octopath Traveler 3 is locked in as well. I think that that's absolutely happening. Octopath Traveler 3 would be a phenomenal type of game to release on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, a couple different things here in terms of me personally. I feel that they need to maybe evolve the formula a little bit for the 3rd game. Yes, they have the different stories and all of that and kind of how it's separated, but they tried to intertwine them a bit more. I think at this point, you need to fully take that structure and break it apart and try something a little bit different. And I feel that that could really breathe some more life into the Octopath Traveler series from a story perspective. Combat-wise, gameplay-wise, all of that, visuals, beautiful. That's great. Keep that and continue to innovate upon that. They have the latent powers in Octopath Traveler 2. Continue to add new things into it and make it just as fun and make it even better, because I know when it comes to gameplay, Octopath Traveler is one of the best. So I personally feel that Octopath Traveler 3 can not only hit high points in terms of gameplay, but also try something very different when it comes to the story and the structure of the game to get more people interested. All right, let's move on to the next one here, guys, and it's Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, I'm not going with Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm going with Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 is a game that they wanted on the Nintendo Switch, and they tried, but the system just couldn't handle that engine that Square Enix had at one point. When it comes down to it, the Luminous engine just wasn't it. They had to start moving everything over to Unreal Engine 4 because the Luminous engine just wasn't developer friendly enough and just didn't play nice with the systems. And pretty much at this point, they've scrapped that engine and started over when it comes down to it. So I think that Final Fantasy 15 could be something that they just say, hey, look, we've already ported it over. It's already there. It's one of the best-selling Final Fantasy games of all time. We put it out there on the Nintendo Switch too. They got the pocket version for Final Fantasy 15 on the Switch. We put this one on there. We put all the DLC. We do everything with it, and I think that it can do pretty well. Now, a problem is that the file size will be there, so we'll see how Nintendo handles physical game cartridges, how much those cost compared to what's going on. But I do think that Square Enix isn't quite done with that. A Final Fantasy 15 Royal Edition complete for the Nintendo Switch, I think could do very well, as people are somewhat jaded on Final Fantasy 16 in Japan. I think that going back to Final Fantasy 15 and doing some of the things that people really loved about the Final Fantasy series could spark some new interest in that game, because it's such an odd release in terms of its development and what happened when it started, when it finished, all the things that happened, the producer and how he left the company, the DLC being unfinished when it comes to some of the other projects. It's just crazy, and I think that they just maybe want to really bring that back one more time and actually get some pretty good sales from that for like $40 or $50 for a complete edition on the Nintendo Switch 2. So let's move on to the next game here, and that is Soul Hackers 2, a game that probably should have been made for the Nintendo Switch, considering the last time that we got this was the 3DS version of, I think, the original Sega Saturn or something like that version. So I'm not sure the planning, what they decided to do with this. I think they felt that anybody would just play the game, but Soul Hackers is already more of a niche subgenre of the SMT series. It's not as popular as SMT Mainline. It's not as popular as Persona. It's underneath all of those, and then you put it on systems where people have no idea about. Most people probably played it on the 3DS or Sega Saturn back in the day. So the Nintendo Switch probably would have been the platform to do that for, but they decided to opt for Xbox and PlayStation and PC, and that's fine. The game itself also necessarily wasn't that incredible, but I do think that they haven't quite given up. They haven't quite given up, and I feel that maybe they just want to salvage something and put it on the Nintendo Switch 2, especially if it's going to be an easy port. We've seen Atlas do this with other games. So for example, a game like Catherine, that was a game that nobody really thought about afterwards. I mean, it was something that was a thing on the Xbox 360 and PS3 back in the day, but then all of a sudden, boom, here's a full body edition for the Nintendo Switch, and people are like, okay, I guess. So I think that Soul Hackers 2 could be that type of game for the Nintendo Switch 2. So we'll see what happens there. Next up, let's talk about some Scarlet Nexus. This is a game that's very underrated in my opinion. If you're into a game like Astral Chain, for example, I think that Scarlet Nexus would be right up your alley, and I feel that Bandai Namco wanted to put Scarlet Nexus on the Nintendo Switch, but I felt that probably technically there were some issues here and there. Not that it couldn't be done, but they just probably felt that maybe it's not quite a good fit right at this point. They didn't have the resource necessarily to do it how they wanted to do it and how it would be quality-wise. I think that the Nintendo Switch 2, perfect opportunity to put a game like this. We saw some of the late ports that are coming over. They're bringing over Ace Combat to the Nintendo Switch. Dragon Ball Kakarot came over, so I think that they had resources put on certain games that they felt might sell better or fit with that, but games like Scarlet Nexus maybe fell to the wayside a little bit. They got a Game Pass bag, so I don't think it was necessarily as big of a priority, but a complete edition of Scarlet Nexus with all the DLC and everything there on the Nintendo Switch 2 probably seems like something that is going to happen, especially with Nintendo and Bandai Namco now more working together with the new studios that have been developed to work on Nintendo platforms going forward in the future. Next up, speaking of Astral Chain, let's talk about Astral Chain 2. Now, this is not an announced game or anything. Astral Chain 1 is one of the most underrated games on the Nintendo Switch, hands down. One of the best games that I've ever played. It really is that good. So I absolutely see them making an Astral Chain 2 on the Nintendo Switch 2 at some point. Now, this is one of those games that I don't think it necessarily fits a early title just because you're not going to have as many people with the system, so you're not going to have as many sales. So this is something that maybe you announced about a year or two into the system's life, and then it comes out to more of an install base. Astral Chain 1 was such a surprise announcement. It was out of nowhere in February 2019, and it launched at the end of August, and it really did a great job. It's still, to this point, the best-selling Platinum Games title on the Nintendo Switch, and that has all the Bayonetta games on there. So that tells you something. Over 1.3 million units sold, so I think that there's definitely a future for an Astral Chain 2 on the next generation Nintendo Switch. Plus, the developers of the game did state that they have in their brain like a planned trilogy. Now, they don't have anything on paper when it comes to everything, but they have some ideas of what they wanted to do for the game. And if you've played Astral Chain 1, it absolutely leads itself to make more games in the story, in the universe. The gameplay is so unique. It's phenomenal. So I see them making Astral Chain 2 on the Nintendo Switch 2. Next up is another Bandai Namco game, Tales of Arise. We got to talk about this because I think this is another game that they probably wanted on the Nintendo Switch, but due to technicalities, due to resources, development teams, and what they're doing, they just couldn't get it on there. So they opt for a game like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot instead that has a bit more mass appeal as a Dragon Ball game. But I think that finally Tales of Arise with all the DLC complete edition comes to the Nintendo Switch 2, and I think that obviously you're going to get a better quality game than what it would have been on the Nintendo Switch, considering it's a big Unreal Engine 4 JRPG. I like Tales of Arise. I think that it's a solid game. It's not my favorite action RPG out there, and there's definitely some things that I don't like in terms of how it goes to a canned battle arena instead of just battles playing out right there in real time like Xenoblade or like Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. But at the same time, I still think that it's a phenomenal experience, a good game, and players are really going to enjoy it because Tales of Vesperia did incredibly well on the Nintendo Switch as an incredibly old Xbox 360 JRPG ported over. And even the Tales of Symphonia, that botched re-release, that botched remaster, did best on the Nintendo Switch. So I think that Tales of Arise does come over. Now, speaking of a game from an older platform, let's talk about the Wii U and Xenoblade Chronicles X. And yes, this is interesting because I think that Xenoblade Chronicles X, there's been rumors, there's been this, there's been that. I've talked about it pretty much every single year and have been wrong when it comes to Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Nintendo Switch. And you know what? It's still very possible, but I think that if you're going to re-release Xenoblade Chronicles X, if you're going to do it, you got to do it big. You got to do it in a way that's going to be very impressive, and I feel that the Nintendo Switch 2 can really lead Xenoblade Chronicles X to be an even better game. Now, this game was a miracle on the Wii U. Heck, it was a unique game on the Wii U. The fact that it was an open world RPG, completely open world with pretty much no loading screens until you go, I think, to like New LA, maybe even then there might be a few here and there, but for the most part, no loading screens at all while you're playing in game, and it had data packs. This is something that no other Wii U game, and I don't think anything Nintendo's done in a while or anything in the modern era, data packs to help it load faster and everything. It was crazy the way that they developed this game for the Wii U when many people felt that the system just wasn't capable of having open world experiences. If you have the Nintendo Switch 2, a stronger system than the Nintendo Switch, and you put that on there and you remaster it and tinker with it a bit, I think that you're going to get an incredible experience that will be awesome to play anywhere that you want. Xenoblade Chronicles X is truly a hybrid game. If I ever thought that it was a hybrid game, man, it would be phenomenal. So maybe, just maybe, Xenoblade Chronicles X makes it over to the Nintendo Switch 2. Now let's talk about Persona 3 Reload, because Persona 3 Reload, just like Metaphor ReFantazio, was rumored by someone who is a noted, certifiable, and accurate leaker when it comes to Persona. This person is spot on. I made a video on it, so make sure you check out that video if you haven't seen it. It'll be at the end of this one, or I'll have a link in the description below where they talks about it and saying that Metaphor ReFantazio and Persona 3 Reload are coming. Now, the thing about this is that the developers did state that, hey, look, you know, we never really planned it for the Nintendo Switch, but we'll see what happens in the future. Well, that's essentially the code for, yeah, it's coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. Unreal Engine 4 game definitely could have been made for the Nintendo Switch, but if you heard what they said about Persona 5 for the Nintendo Switch, they stated that it was definitely something that was difficult to do. It wasn't easy because of the system and how it was. Now, obviously, Persona 5 is a PS3 game, but you're still working with different architecture. You're still working with different systems and different language when it comes down to it at the end of the day, so nothing's going to be easy porting things over. I think that if you have a system like the Nintendo Switch that's stronger, that has more RAM, more modern, whatever the case is, you can get a better quality product out there, and you can say, hey, Persona on the new Nintendo system. That has such a great ring to it, and people are still buying Persona 5 and getting acclimated with the Persona series with 3, 4, and 5 on the Nintendo Switch. I think this is a perfect stepping stone to the next one. So yes, Persona 3 Reload, in my opinion, will be coming based off of everything here. It's very likely to happen. Now we're down to the top 2, guys. Let's talk about why we haven't seen the Dragon Quest games that have been announced for years now. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake. We'll start with that one first. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake, they showed it and then it disappeared. There's no reason why this game would disappear like this. There's zero reason why this game would disappear like this. The only reason why it disappeared is because they're waiting for the Nintendo's presentation. They're waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2, and it's probably, maybe, going to be a cross-gen title. Maybe that's the case. Now, we've seen what's happened with Nintendo and Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest 11S, they haven't announced the numbers post. They did like the million plus in Japan and all that. They haven't announced the numbers, but the game was incredible. It made Square Enix a ton of money on the Nintendo Switch as a full-priced port, and then eventually it got some discounts and sales, but it's still a game that's not necessarily the cheapest on the Nintendo Switch, and people still continue to buy the game. You look at Dragon Quest Monsters of Dark Prince, over 1 million sold as a low-tier, low-budget type of game, okay? Money flowing in like crazy when it comes to Nintendo and Dragon Quest. They are not gonna miss the opportunity to release on the new system. Maybe it's on the Nintendo Switch, but they're not gonna miss the opportunity to have that announcement. There is a patterned and storied history of Dragon Quest and Nintendo teaming up to have games or announcements. So that's the reason why I think this game has went silent. I think that this game is a game that they just want on Switch and Switch 2. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking this long and not talking about it at all. I've never seen this before from Square Enix when it comes to Dragon Quest. They usually give us some updates, but it's been like 3 years plus or something like that since this game was announced. It's been a while. Now, let's move over to the next game. Dragon Quest 12, The Flames of Fate. Yeah, this is another thing. They want to have it on that next system as well. Now, that doesn't mean that these games aren't going to come to other platforms. It's very possible that these games come to other platforms as well, but I just think that they know when it comes to Nintendo, Japan, Square Enix, Dragon Quest, it all just works, and it works really well when you have it right there at launch. Now remember, Dragon Quest 11 was first announced for the Nintendo NX. Dragon Quest 10 was first announced for the Nintendo Wii. So there is a long history of saying, hey, the platform that it's going to be on is this platform, and yes, it comes over to other systems. Dragon Quest 10 did, and Dragon Quest 11 did as well, but they like to have it announced with the Nintendo platform at a big event, considering how dominant Nintendo software sales are in Japan, and now at this point, obviously console sales, but Nintendo has pretty much ruled Japan for the past 20 years, so there's definitely a symbiotic relationship between Dragon Quest, one of the most popular games ever in the history of Japan, and Nintendo, the most popular company in terms of game sales and everything in Japan as well. So I think that this is going to be a match together. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake, Dragon Quest 12 The Flames of Fate, next gen Nintendo Switch. Let's go at the next event. So we'll see how that works out. So that's going to wrap it up for this video here, guys. What do you guys think? What are other likely games in general, or JRPGs, RPGs, that could be coming to Nintendo Switch 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out some of my other top 25 best Nintendo Switch videos and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.